We have a special yard site next Thursday that Rabbi Schoonmaker, the great Gaon and founder of the Musar movement, who lived from 1809 till 1883. So that might be beneficial to share a little bit about the man and his Torah. You might say there are plenty of tzaddikim, plenty of Gaonim, Baruch Hashem, Lo Almin Yisrael. We've had so many down the generation. Every generation has big tzaddikim. So every week we could focus on a different one. It wouldn't be a bad idea. But what's so special about Rabbi Yisrael? But I believe Rabbi Yisrael is different. In a word, he is the father of all the Lithuanian yeshivas today, and through that, a semi-father to almost all of the institutions of Torah learning in the whole Jewish world. He is a true father to our Jewish world. Let's explain a little bit. When I promote the yeshiva, I will sometimes say that we are a full-service, uniquely effective at skills building yeshiva. Full service, uniquely effective at skills building yeshiva. So there's a lot of that description. Now is not the time or place to describe all that, but I want to focus on one word, the last word, yeshiva. We're not a university of Talmud. As Rabbi Silverberg says, this is a place where we grow as B'nai Torah. That's why we have B'nai Torah Chaburas. And we know that how to tackle a text correctly is a very important piece of that, but it is a piece of that. Now, maybe that idea is self-evident today. But understand that once it wasn't. The Haskalah, the so-called Enlightenment, had made great inroads into so much of the Jewish world. And you had many yeshivas that were to some extent taken over with that spirit. Gemara is fun. Intellectually challenging. Why not smoke a cigarette as you learn on Shabbos? Yirah Shamayim, Tikkun Dveikus to Hashem, connection to Rabbeim, old-time religion, those are archaic topics. Opening the masses stuff, not for us. I'll just give a few examples to show you that this is a reality. Rav Ruderman, who became one of the Gedolim in America, the Rashiv of Bnei Yisrael. I was here, I heard about him when I was in America from one of the Rabbanim I was already here last week. So he wanted to go, he was a Talmud in Slobodka, the famous Slobodka. That was a clear Rabbi Yisrael. Rabbi Yisrael was involved in the founding of Slobodka. And he wanted to go learn by one of the great Gaonim of the generation. And Alta Slobodka, who had a deep perception into the time, said, and knew that Gaon, while being a great Talmud Chacham, didn't understand the ruach of what was going on so well enough. He didn't know how to control the things. So Slobodka was a townlet in Kovna. Kovna was the bigger city, and Slobodka was like a suburb. And there was a bridge used to go over. They used to say in Slobodka, it's a one-way bridge. You go take the bridge once into Slobodka, you never really leave Slobodka. But anyway, so the altar got out of his seat and turned to the young Rav Ruderman. And he said, if you want to go learn by that person, just go jump into the river now. That's all it'll be. You'll be done. Rav Fabian Schoenfeld, the famous Rav, related that he met Rav Aaron Kotler's sister. Rav Aaron Kotler was really the greatest Torah builder, arguably in our times, and incredible person. So he was a genius. And his sister on her, in the nursing home, was lamenting the fact that her brother didn't become the great mathematician he could have been. This is what Rabbi Schoenfeld related. And it's known that the Chavetz Chaim was, the Haskalah members tried very hard to turn him into the mathematical genius that he could have been. So, no one should think him against mathematics. That's not the point. The point was that it was coming out of an utter lack of understanding what a Torah scholar is. You understand what Rav Aaron Kotler did, what he became, what would have been lost to the world. But that was the ruach. Why should he become a Talmud Chacham? So there's the three isolated examples, but I did bring them as representatives of the very strong winds which were sweeping through Lithuania and Poland 1880, 100 years, 30 years ago. And the Musar-oriented yeshivas, places, and it became a concept. Rabbi Yisrael and Alta Slobodka, etc., especially Alta Slobodka, to change the realm of the yeshivas and put Musar into the yeshivas. All the places we know, like Kelm and the Mir, Kletsk, Lakewood, Neg Yisrael, Chaim Berlin, Chevron, Panovich, Grodno, the Chavetz Chaim chain of yeshivas, Slobodka, Radin, Navardik, and its chain of yeshivas, they stood boldly against that foul ruach, and through having a Musar Seder and Shmuzim and very smart Mashgichim and the like, they guarded the true image of what a yeshiva was. And just like when we think about the Chashmonaim, what's Chanukah all about? There are people who stood up and saved the day. And Klal Yisrael would look different if it wasn't for those people. And like we can appreciate it in the areas we were just at that Baal Tshuva event. As was said many times, there were founding people, 40, 50 years ago who created something. And that's what we were living in. So on a much bigger scale, that was what was happening. And if it hadn't been for that, we wouldn't be hearing in our yeshiva a Musar Shmuz right now. Taking off time from learning Gemara for Musar. They're ridiculous. And we might not have poskim or lesson-oriented Chumash shiurim, and we might not exist at all. It would just be a college of Talmudic studies. Besides that, although the Musar movement definitely did not live up to Rabbi Yisrael's dreams for it, that's clear, it still had a profound effect widely on Jewish thinking today, and in and out of yeshivas. As we said, almost every yeshiva today has Musar Starim and Shmuzim, and people around the world learned the books that he was pushing, and he and his Talmidim were pushing, like Mesil Yesharim, Chovas Alavavas, Shari Tshuva, and the books of his Talmidim and Talmidim's Talmidim, like Michtav Melio, which is always quoted, Ali Shor, Rabbi Rucham, and everybody, when you think about it, when they learn Chumash, they look for lessons, and don't just say dry, technical, grammatical pshat, although there's a place for that in Chumash. So there's a lot more to say on that, and how he affected further, that had ripple effects into the whole Jewish world, but we're going to suffice with that. So let's touch now, in the moments we have, on some essential aspects of his teaching and his depth, and hopefully we can put into practice some of his teachings. What do you think? Avram Avinu, his greatest moment, the 10th Nisayan, according to many, that Kedah, Shechting the son. Think about this for a second. Yourselves, don't answer. Was he happy or was he sad at the time of the Kedah? That moment of Akedah Yitzchak. Happy or sad? On this one I wouldn't say happy or unhappy. I would say happy or sad. Happy or sad? So I would have thought, my default would have been, as a true Eved Hashem, for sure he was happy. One who loves someone else puts aside everything else for his love. Let me show you the things you do for love. For sure he wasn't, it wasn't Noach to him to have to shech the son, but the ultimate love that he had for his creator, Avram Oavi, Echad Avram, Eitan Hazeh, was happy. And their midrashim that say he was gloriously happy, as I would have imagined. But there are other midrashim that say he was crying terribly. So which is it? How would you approach that? A steer in the midrashim. One medrash says he was happy. Another medrash says he was crying terribly. What's going on? So Rabbi Yisrael had, and here is the point I want to show, a breakthrough understanding that there are many levels that a person operates on. And on one level, of course he was happy, like I thought. Because that chance to express his love for his Creator, which is what his whole life was dedicated to, and his whole essence was, he who found the Kadosh Baruch Hu at 3 and kept working on his understanding, 40, 48, etc., and then brought the whole world, Tachas Kanfei Shechina, was happy. But another level of him, the Abbas Haben, the love of a child, which is so deep in a person, so irascible, because of that he was crying. So at the same time, he had enormous happiness, overwhelming happiness. Appreciate that. And he had an incredible sadness. And listen to this. Which part was deeper? Which one do you think was deeper? The sadness or the happiness? So Rabbi Yisrael explains that the sadness was deeper in a certain way, because his attitudes was in part of his conscious mind, who he was, how he saw things. But the essence, if you will, of a person, or I don't know if the essence is the right word, but that sense of love of child is so deep and not something one should ignore. And not if Avram didn't get over it, certainly not for us to get over it. Right? People misunderstand what religion is about. You see here the humanity of the Muslim movement, that they understood that. And both of those things were happening at the same time. At the same time. An amazing insight. And if you think about it, isn't it like that often? One goes to a wedding, and you're happy. It could be your own wedding. I always say Jewish weddings, are a mixed bag. If you look, especially for women. On the one hand, they're so happy, they're so worried though. What about, what's going to happen with this? What's going to happen with that? Or sometimes deeper, people have difficulties, real difficulties. So for sure they're happy at the wedding. But there's something in the back of your mind which is nagging at you. So am I fully happy? No. Maybe this is part of what it means that after the Churban, after the destruction of the Holy Temple, we're prohibited to fill our mouths with mirth and happiness. Asur l'adam shimalis chok pi b'olam hazeh. As you know, it's asur. So what does that mean? You can't tell a joke? You can't smile? So maybe the idea is, and I'm not speaking halakha here, just suggesting, that since the Churban, we're never permitted to be in a full sense of joy with all aspects of ourselves going in that direction. Full ecstasy. No. A Jew has to understand always that there's something, the world is lacking, the Shekhinah is not here, Klal Yisrael is broken apart, like we heard about the other night. So many Jews are still not here. You can be fully happy today? You can't. And the desire to even be there is lacking. So you can't be happy at all? Of course we're happy. But that contrast is there because there are different aspects to ourselves. Rabbi Yisrael gives many examples in different places of this multi-level, layered reality of man. Here's an incredible example. How did Shaul become the first king? Looking forward to learning Nach next week on the Super Teal. That's not a surprise. Other surprises coming. Rabbi Klaus is going to lead us. Some Limud Nach. It's going to be incredible. I don't know if this is what we're going to learn, but this is what happened. What was Shaul's name? Kish. So Kish had lost some donkeys. And he sent his son Shaul and an attendant, important, two people, right? Shaul is his son and an attendant, to find the lost donkeys. As he's looking for the donkeys, he happened upon Shmuel the prophet, who told him, interesting news. What did he tell him? You're becoming the king of the Jewish people. That's how it happened. As he's looking for donkeys, Shmuel says to him, you're the Melech Yisrael. And listen to these words. Natash avichas divrei asonos. Your father has stopped worrying about the donkeys and the mules. V'da'ag lechem. What's that mean? Da'ag lechem. And he's worried about who? Lachem is what? The plural you. Who? Who's the lechem? No.
Him and the attendant.
Him and the attendant. Lemor ma'aseh libani. What shall I do for my son? So who's he worried about? Who is Kish worried about? Right? Shmuel is telling him that get back to your father because he's not worried about the donkeys anymore. He's more worried about you. You've been gone for a few days. And he's dog lechem. He's worried about you. The plural you and the attendant. And what's he saying? Ma'aseh libni. What shall I do for my son? So, but who is Kish worried about? Is he worried about lechem, or is he worried about both of them, or is he worried about one? So again, Rabbi Yisrael uses this incredible understanding to delve into this. The derech of a tzaddik, which Kish was, if he had a son like Shaul, is to worry about not just his people. A good person doesn't just worry about his kid in his class. He worry about the class. Worry about the shir. For sure. Lechem. And that's true and real. But on a deeper level, what's really going on in Kish's mind is Ma'aseh Libni. So in this very, very pasuk, we see the two levels. Ma'aseh V'dog Lechem. He's worried about both of you. But deep down, on a deeper level, what's he saying? Ma'aseh Libni. What will I say to my son? Rabbi Yisrael goes forward and says like this. You can have one action, and for that same action, he brings proofs to this, a person can get rewarded and punished. Because part of it is clean and good, and part of it is negative, and in that same moment, for part of it you get a reward, and part of it you get a punishment. So the underlying point that I'm trying to bring out, friends, is that there is a lot of depth to the human being. And many layers that we're acting upon, and Rabbi Yisrael, a lot of his Torah, and a lot of his whole life, and a lot of the whole Musar movement, was plumbing the depth of all of those layers. And some even see, there are books about this, they see Rabbi Yisrael as a forerunner of modern psychology, speaking about ideas of consciousness before Freud and others spoke about it. And it's a new way to resolve contradictions and questions in the Torah. That if you see others from didn't go about these same questions, they didn't go it that way without this knowledge. Why is it so important for us? The basis of our lives, our relationships, our avodas Hashem, is that we know ourselves. Let's take a topic we all deeply want to be successful at. Marriage. Without knowing the different operation levels we operated, without understanding our strengths and weaknesses, without understanding that different things can live in me at the same time, it's very difficult to form a healthy unit with another person. As singles, we might have been highly successful in our relationships. And we just assumed that if I was a good bacher, student, employee, for sure I'm going to be a good husband or wife. Bad assumption. You are patient, so you believe. But now with someone who's connected to you 24/7, who sometimes gets on your nerves, will you still be patient then? You're a giver, but not constantly. You never get angry. Really? If you'd be really honest with yourself, you would have noticed the traces of those negative midas in yourself. But most people aren't trained to be that honest with themselves. And I want to share a very important thing. We might be talented and accomplished in many other vitally important areas. We might love Shabbos and Yom Tov. We might feel we reached Dveikus and no halacha. We might be big masmidim and learn very well. But this is a different area. The scene is Shanghai around 1943. And Shanghai in 1943 was a very interesting place because it was a place where many refugees went. The biggest group that was there, of course, was the Mir Yeshiva. They were famously there, and that's many books are written about that, and that's well known. But there were Hasidim there. And you have to realize, in the Jewish world, Amol, as we say, a long time ago, you can have Hasidim who never saw Litvaks, and Litvaks who never saw Hasidim. They're people who live really, really separate. They just never, there were, I think, Rabbi Lopiansky said once, my father never saw Hasidim. I think that was what he said. But you can meet people like that. You run into them. It wasn't. So there was a confluence in Shanghai because of refugees, Hasidim and Litvaks. And there was a Rebbe, I don't know what the Rebbe's name was, who met Leib Box. Leib Box was an outstanding Talmid in the Mir Yeshiva. He became Rosh Yeshiva eventually in Detroit. They say he could do the pin trick in the Shas, or Leib Box. Famous person. Rabbi Box. Anyway, so Rabbi Box ran into a Rebbe. It might have been the Amshin of a Rebbe. I know the Amshin of a Rebbe was there, but when I heard the story, it didn't say Amshin of, maybe it was Amshin of a Rebbe, and said that I heard a lot about Rabbi Yerucham Levovitz. Yerucham Levovitz was like the seminal, most important figure of what we call like the third or fourth generation of Musar, and he had been the Mashgiach in the Mir Yeshiva. He passed away in 1936, and the Rebbe, had his little Litvak friend, Tom Bacher, and he said, and I heard so much about Rabbi Yerucham, this great person who had died 7-8 years ago, tell me something from Rabbi Yerucham. Tell me Dvar Torah. So Rabbi Box told him in Dvar Torah all about the negative aspects of man and the dangers that are inherent in a person's personality, different things like that. And the Rebbe said, Gewaldig. Gewaldig. The Torah was amazing. But I want to say, me with my Hasidim, we have a different approach. If you imagine like a big building, I take people to a high level in the building, and then when you look out, you see the horizon, you see great things. You don't see the garbage. When you look on a lower level, you see the garbage. What he was saying was, it's very nice that Rabbi Yerucham was talking about the lower level of a person, but there's a higher way to speak to people. So Rabbi Box was a man of truth, and this bothered him, and he went to the mashgiach of the Mir then, who was the famous Yecheskel Levenstein. Okay? One mashgiach about another mashgiach. And he said to him, this is what happened with the Rebbe. What do you say? So Cheskel Levenstein, tell him about Sasson's house. Go back to the Rebbe and tell him about Sasson's house. Who was Sasson? Sasson was a rich person who had lived in Shanghai, and he moved, as rich people do, to get a bigger house. He moved out to the burbs. He moved to the Shanghai burbs. And he built a beautiful, beautiful big mansion for himself. And there's one problem. He built the mansion on a landfill. Everybody knows what a landfill is? You take lots and lots of garbage, and you cover with, and you pack it in, and you put dirt down, and you grow, and then you can, and etc. So he built a house on the landfill. What happens? After a few years, this house started leaning. When I was younger in Asbury Park, there was a haunted house. It was, you could slip down the thing. So the house started slipping. It was good for sponger, but it wasn't good for living, That's why he said, go tell the Rebbe this story. What's the point? The point is that a person could build his life on garbage, right? And you could be involved in all types of high-level things, but the inherent lower-level midas in a person are very problematic. You see terrible machlokas a lot of time in Klal Yisrael. And I want to tell you the secret. Often it's with chashuv people. It wasn't people who were nobodies. What happened? How did these people get involved in machlokas? How could it be them, So, I don't really know. But I often imagine that it was people, when they were younger, before they were challenged, didn't work enough on their midas. They didn't work on the lower level aspects of themselves to understand themselves that well. And they got along fine until there was a real challenge. A related point is the idea of living an inner life. There's a book that was translated recently by Rav Yisrael. It's well worth buying, called The Inner Life. Absolutely incredible. Breathtaking. I don't say that about a lot of books. I haven't felt that. It is a breathtaking book to read about Rav Yisrael. The Inner Life. Society is pushing us so strongly to be so superficial today. Outwardly, superficiality. People showcase their families, their birthdays, their children. Why are you showcasing your child? I want to share some ideas, etc. What is that? A 5-year-old? You train your 5-year-old to be... I say sometimes, I'll say right now, there was a girl that got married a few years ago, and she had in her wedding gown them stitch a place for her phone. And she took pictures in the yichud room. A frum girl. I mean, are we insane that things like this are happening? This is pre-AI. And now, Rachmani Atzilenu, things get worse and worse. People are going to live in this, in outside realities of themselves, and that speaks to us. Why live with a real person when I could have an AI friend? Like what? Really? Yes. They make me feel good the whole time. They're kind, considerate, encouraging, etc. Why should I live in reality? It's incredible. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter's original plan was to be a nister, was to be hidden. He wanted to be hidden. And he was going to move to a place where nobody knew him, and he was going to take on menial labor, like being a water carrier or something like this. You understand what we're talking about? Gaon ha-gaonim. Think of the greatest rabbi you know times 1,000. You're not getting close to where Rabbi Yisrael Salanter was in learning, in Kedusha. This was his job. He was going to go somewhere. No one's going to know about him. And he'll be a water carrier. Maybe a taxi driver. I don't know. Right? And his plan was to do this. He has to know all Shas memorized, so no one should Chas Hashem see him learning, but he has to learn. So he'll memorize Shas, memorized. And he has to be able to daven really quickly with holding all the kavanas. I don't know if they're Kavanas Hari, I don't know what, but all the Kavanas he has to be able, because if he davens too slowly, people will figure it out. But he has to be able to daven with the Kavanas. So he's training himself to daven extremely quickly, holding on to all the Kavanah and no Shas. He got through half of Shas, and then he decided that the generation needs him to reveal himself, so that's when he revealed himself. And one of his Talmidim said, the truth is, even though he revealed himself, he remained a nister. I think the Baal Shem said that Tzaddik in the Starim, even the Gdom that revealed themselves, remained Tzaddik in the Starim. But the point, why am I bringing this down, friends? The desire, imagine someone of such greatness that his real basic desire was that no one should know who he was. No one should know about him, no one should think about him, not that his name should get out there. Speaking to myself, how we live. And our world is becoming more and more outward, more and more disconnected to ourselves, to our inner life, at a frightening pace. So he's a great example. He and his Talmidim, there was a very big kav, mahalach amongst the Bali Musar always to remain hidden. I'll tell you one current story. I want to get to one other part, but the Rabbeim Finkel, who the Rosh Yeshiva were with in the Mir Yeshiva, so he was learning one time late at night and in his room, and he had a guest, and he was learning in his kitchen, and the guest came out, and quickly he hit his Gemara and he started peeling an apple. So much I think I'm learning late at night. He's peeling an apple. So this big gadol, what's he doing? He's eating an apple. That's what he wanted him to think. What are you doing late at night? I am eating apples. So Rabosai, let's talk about one other aspect. Time is short. But that's the point. To be aware and connected to where you really are in life, your emotional reality, the different parts of you, my better parts, my lower parts, to understand my better parts, not to ignore my lower parts, to be aware of the deeper negative powers that have a certain hold on us. And then when a person is disconnected from that, he's in a dangerous position. Because you could think you're doing a very, very big mitzvah, like making a machlokes, and you're doing a very, very big avera. But you think you're doing a mitzvah. L'shem shemayim is a dangerous word. Rabbi Yerucham Levavitz used to say, covet a Torah, covet a Torah, covet a Torah. You blink and it's your own covet. You're not worried about the Rosh Hashanah anymore. You're worried about yourself. And it's so easy to get caught in that. Rav Wolbe once told me when I merited driving him, I merited driving Rav Wolbe a few times, the great mashgiach. He said that Rav Dessler said that the koach of gaiva is so much, well, how strong is the koach of gaiva that's in us? He said it's so much that a person would go to Kisei HaKavod and tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu to get off of it so he could sit on it. That's a koach in us. So someone who wants to go in the way of Rabbi Salanter is constantly evaluating his reasons for doing things and operates with a great level of self-awareness. Next week is Parshas Mishpatim. Just to bring quickly one other aspect of his Masorah, of his teachings. And it said, next week, as we said, it's Parshas Mishpatim, it said it was obviously Bashkacha that Rabbi Yisrael died. His yahrzeit is on Thursday. Because so much of what he taught was a super emphasis on Ben Em L'Chaveiro. And Parshas Mishpatim was all about the halachas of man to man. Rabbi Yisrael was asked once, what kavanah does one have to have when donning a talis? I like to say this one. He said, ikka kavanah you have to have, not to hit the guy. And you've had that. You've done it, experienced it, or seen it. You know, the red strip on someone's forehead. He's not Indian. It was someone smacking him with his talis. What is the main chumrah which one should be careful about when making matzah? So Rabbi Salanter said, the main chumrah you should be careful about? Don't work the almanas too hard. It used to be the almanas were the ones who take care of matzah. He famously would use less water for Netil Sidayim because the maid would have to schlep it. Back then when they didn't have faucets. When the second day of Rosh Hashanah came out on Friday, there's an Indian to say less putim, because you have the Shabbos, you have the Yom Tov davening, and then we have Shabbos coming up. And Rabbi Yisrael agreed to that minute, and he even cut out Yusana Tokef. But there were certain types of putim he wouldn't cut out. Which ones? There were parts between the Malchus Zichronos and Malchus Shofar Zichronos where the shots had a minute to rest. So the piyutim you can cut out. You can cut out a Nisana Tokef, the part we wait for all year. That you can cut out of davening. But you have to give the Shliach Tzibur some time to gather his breath. His Talmud. Talmidim. The Altus Labotka once saw a man embarrassing his wife at the Shabbos table. And he said, you cover the challahs, not to embarrass the challahs. Poor challahs, What's going to be with the challah if it sees the wine is in front of it? Right? The sensitivity, we cover the challah. But your wife, you're embarrassed. The Altus Labotka also said, when it comes to cadaver, I heard this from Jonas and David, when it comes to cadaver, people are so careful, So if you're watching cadaver, it's, you're always worried maybe the hand's going to slip off the bed. What am I going to do? The hand's going to slip off. You move the hand back on. When it comes to a live person, you run him over. And it wasn't just that he was careful, he taught others to be careful. And as you see in these examples, if you think about it, he used his enormous seichel. Rabbi Yisrael said, I had the head of 1,000 people. That same koach, which so many apply to Shabbos and to other areas of halacha, he applied it to Bein L'Chavero, and he was mechadish things in Bein L'Chavero, and he made these chumras in Bein L'Chavero, in this area, in Parshas Mishpatim, using all of the seichel. So we have to take that method and use our heads not just for Gemara and for specifics in Kashrus and Shabbos, which are of course very important, but for Bein L'Chavero, to find new situations we need to be careful about, other people's feelings, and find new ways to make other people happy. Good. How can I make other people happy? How can I be careful more? So, obviously speaking to myself. Let's just quickly finish with an example or two of his own sensitivity. Just share two things. Rabbi Yisrael used to walk in the town, and he would hear the shutters, like the old-time shutters, making noise. And he would fix people's shutters. This is the Gadol Hador. He would go and fix the shutter because he knew at night it's going to bang. You can't let someone's shutters bang. So you understand, the Gadol, the greatest rabbi you can imagine, is going, with a screwdriver. There used to be a thing called the hektish. The hektish was where poor people would sleep. That was why its name was hektish. And it was one time not fixed. I think it was in Vilna, when he was in Vilna, and the hektish was dangerous, something, and he told the Rabbeim to fix it. They didn't fix it. What did he do? He went and slept in the hektish. The Gadol Hador is lying down, endangering himself in order to get that the poor people in town should get a better lot. And there are hundreds of stories like this. I'll finish with this story, that Rabbi Yisrael died in Königsberg. That's where he was. I think that was in Germany. People named Königsberg from there. And there was a person that was there assigned to be with him. And these were the last days. No one knew exactly when the end was coming. And Rabbi Yisrael suddenly turned to this person and started saying, people are sometimes alone with a dead person. It's nothing to be worried about, nothing to be scared of. Don't worry about. It happens. No, he dies. Okay. A few hours later, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter died. That was it. So you can only imagine it sounded like that. What's he thinking about as he's going to meet his Creator, the one he loves, the one who's been working for his whole life? What's he thinking about? I'm going to die in a few hours. Not me, right? This is what he's thinking. And this guy's going to be alone with me, and he's going to be scared. So his parting moments of this world, he's spending bringing sukkah and consolation, and that another Jew, another human being shouldn't feel scared. So this, friends, was, we just only scratched the surface, but at least we made a beginning. Because with Hashem, we can take these weeks to know ourselves better, to be more honest, and especially to realize that the whole world of Bein L'Chavero, which we need to develop and focus on, and we all should be zocha to be Talmidim of this giant amongst giants. Yehi Zichro Baruch.